Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Hi there. Welcome to our talk. The topic today is the blind spot. And I was talking about how I've been teaching my son to drive for the last few years. He is 17 and a half. He's going to college in a few weeks. I won't talk about that for too long right now because I'll start crying. But I started teaching him during the pandemic. He is one of the kids who began high school from his bedroom over Zoom. And at the time, he was a little young to start learning how to drive, but I wanted to give him something exciting and something that felt like a milestone at a time when, so many of the things that we would normally be doing, like socializing, and for him, like being on campus and meeting people and, being in a much bigger school environment, like those things weren't happening. And so I started teaching him how to drive in all these parking lots that had no cars in them. So and of course, one of the things that you teach when you're teaching someone to drive is the blind spot, right? And how you have to adjust your mirrors, but also look over your shoulder if you're changing lanes or, exiting the free, whatever it is. And as this has, progressed, time has passed, my son has gotten taller and taller and taller. He's now 6'1", and he towers over. I look up to speak to him. And when his driving test is in a couple of weeks, but when he is driving my car and then I get in to drive my car after, I have to adjust everything. I have to move the seat forward. I have to adjust the rear view, the side mirrors, like everything, even my chair back. I like to be sitting more upright than he does. So everything needs to get changed. And it occurred to me that he is literally seeing the world from a different vantage point, from a different perspective. And in order, and I'm not going to see the world exactly the way he does. And so it occurred to me that all of the things that I do when I get back in my car and adjusting the mirrors, it's like I am making a physical, tangible effort to, acknowledge, to understand. There isn't any way not to acknowledge that he's seeing the world from a different set of eyes and from a different perspective, and that it would be good for all of us to remember. That's all of us. We're never going to see the world exactly the way other people are seeing it. We're not going to experience things in the same way. So it just got my wheels spinning. And part of what got my wheels spinning also is that I announced a fundraiser that I'm doing in a couple of weeks with a close friend of mine. And it's a yoga class. It's a conversation, but it's mostly a yoga class. And there's an in-person possibility and also online. And so I announced it, and it is for Harris Walls. And so I knew that when I sent this out, some people were not going to be happy. We don't all agree about the best way forward. But I very carefully and painstakingly wrote, it took hours. I really laid out why I feel the way that I do. Because I feel like if you are someone who's reading my essays, you probably already know where I stand. I mean, I haven't been quiet about it. If you're tuning into the podcast, you already know how I feel and why I feel the way that I do. But I really got into the nitty gritty and I linked things and just, I wanted to be as transparent as I could and also to really back up my feelings with things that people can look at and read for themselves or see for themselves. And so, I mean, it took the better part of a day for me to craft this thing. And so I sent the announcement out, and the top of it is really just the date, the time, the place, and the different ways you can join, right? In person or online, the suggested donation, all that stuff. And then I said underneath the image, I have a whole thing here about why I am wholeheartedly throwing my support behind this ticket. And if that is something that you are curious about or, confused or anything, you have strong feelings about it, please read. Like, I wrote this thing for you. And the response has been, to be clear, like incredibly positive and enthusiastic. Most of the response that I've gotten has just been beautiful and excited, and people signing up, and it's going to be a great event, and I'm excited about it. I'm excited to actually do something that feels tangible, to back up the way that I'm feeling, to take some action. And also, I love being in that environment. I love that group energy. And even if it's like people joining online, there's an energy to that. So I'm really excited about it. But I did get a couple of 3 emails from people who felt very differently. And one of these people was incredibly furious and really attacked. She lashed out. And these are heated times, and I was prepared for that. I knew that might happen. But also, I spent about, I don't know, the better part of 7 hours putting this thing together so that it would be very, clear and laid out. And part of what I was writing about was really like a civics lesson, about the way our government works, because it's very clear that a lot of people really don't, know these things, that there are people who honestly believe one person can just kind of snap her fingers and fix these giant issues. And also maybe haven't done the deep dive of what things have been accomplished and why I am excited about this person and why I do feel so much hope and I see so much potential for a much better world for all of us. That's my perspective, right? That's me looking out my window. And that doesn't mean that we could be looking at the same thing and feel very differently about it. And so I think that what I really wanted to kind of dig into today is if you are, feeling like someone is expressing an opinion that is different than your opinion, you don't have to attack. But I think that is what we're primed for it. There's a lot of rage and vitriol, and I think that, so much of it has been manufactured by the media, people clicking on things and rage scrolling, and it has not helped us. And so that's kind of what I want to dig into, is just this environment that we're in where, if you express an opinion that might be different than someone else's opinion, the response is often to feel attacked. And it's really, there are a lot of reasons that people are feeling so heated about the things that that they are invested in right now. And I know for me, that's why I wrote so much, because there are a lot of things for me that are just absolute no's. And I've been talking about them and writing about them. Personally, what is happening to women and girls across 22 states and counting with these incredibly restrictive abortion bans is devastating. And that is just a hard, absolutely not for me. It's not even about whatever your feelings are about abortion. It's what is happening when you leave it to the states, the way these laws are being written, and what is actually happening when women go to the hospital for life-saving health care and are sent to the parking lot to wait until their lives are so at risk no doctor has to worry about losing their license for giving a woman treatment she needs to save her life. I can't, that for me, 2024, like, no, that's just a no for me. But there are so many other things that are a no for me. So I spent a lot of time, expressing them, and it is okay if we don't like agree on everything, but that one is tough for me, because I just feel lives are on the line. And in 2024, for women having to defend their worth, it just feels, it's just such a no for me. So, but I received this very, furious email, and it made me think about so many different aspects. Like I grew up in an environment, in a household, I had two households really, where expressing myself was not welcome. There was a real, I could express joy, happiness, kindness. I could be helpful, but I certainly was not supposed to express rage, or sadness, or anything that would have made the grown-ups around me kind of uncomfortable. And I also grew up, in my mother's household. My mom was an alcoholic, and I've talked about that and written about that a lot. And my dad had a flash temper. So in both households, there was a lot of, but particularly my mother's, and I think particularly in an alcoholic household, that's generally how it is, a lot of just like being on high alert all the time and trying to figure out how to keep myself safe, and what it was okay for me to say or not say, do or not do. Mistakes were, not taught. I mean, the punishment was severe. And so that wiring still lives inside of me. I have to fight against that. I've done a lot of work on that particular issue, because if you are in fear like that all the time, if you are in survival mode, you don't think about what's lighting me up, or where do I find joy, or like what are the hard no's for me, or what, that's not where you're coming from. You are just trying to survive and not pay the price for making a mistake or saying something that someone is going to, respond to in a way that is terrifying. And I don't want to live like that. I lived like that for so long, and I've spent so much time and energy healing from that and working on that at 53, I don't, that's not where I'm at. I've got to be able to say how I feel and say what I think, but my intention's never to upset anyone. Part of obviously a big part of my life has been practicing yoga, teaching yoga, and a big part of my life has been writing. And in both of those areas, and now I'm doing this, right? I have a podcast, I'm expressing myself. That's what I'm doing. When I'm teaching yoga, it's not just, I know that we all, if you've never done it, and you happen to be on Instagram, your impression could be that yoga is like gymnastics, or, putting your ankle behind your head in a handstand on a yacht in Belize. That's not, that's not it. Yoga is really a practice. It's a moving meditation. It's a way to quiet your mind and learn how to focus on sensation, which is always happening in the now. The mind is always heading into the past or racing into the future. And so much of the time, if the mind is heading into the past, it's doing it with sadness or longing or regret. There's some, depression around that. And if it's racing into the future, there's often anxiety or fear, what if scenarios or conversations we rehearse for that might never happen. And sometimes we're rehearsing for disaster, and so just to be able to pull your mind into the present is a huge part of what we're working on. And there's so many different components of that, but paying attention to your breath, right? The breath is always occurring in the now. Any sensation you become aware of is happening right now. So that's a huge part of it. And for me, as somebody whose mind is, if left to its own devices, it's like running, running, running. It was a huge life-changing experience to start feeling that peace of a quiet mind. And also developing the witness. That's a big part of what we talk about in the meditation practice, is this idea that you are not your thoughts. Sometimes the thoughts that we're having are our own. They really are coming out of our own genuine feeling. And sometimes they're thoughts that are flying around from the environment, messages that we're getting, things that we're seeing, ways that we've been told we're supposed to feel, whether we feel that way or not. So having a little space, understanding like I don't have to give every thought in my mind, I don't have to give those thoughts time, attention, and energy. I can decide, you know what, that's not a productive thought. That isn't going to serve me, or I don't believe that. That doesn't resonate with me. I'm going to choose a better thought. And being able to pick your mind up and choose a different thought is also a way to get your time back, right? Because I don't know how many of you have had the experience where you start thinking about something and maybe you've thought about it a million times before. You've already explored this idea or this situation or this way that you were betrayed, or the way that this person interacts with you. Like, this already. So dwelling on it again is it's not going to change anything. It's not going to change what's already happened. It's not going to change. It's just going to bring you down. And being able to pull yourself out of that before you start spiraling and lose a whole afternoon on something that isn't, that's huge, right? That's such a powerful muscle to develop in your mind. And that's a big part of what we're doing, is gaining mastery over the mind. And I think that's ultimately what drew me into this practice so, passionately, was like, oh, there's a different way here. I don't have to allow the things that are happening around me to rule the way that I'm feeling. I have some agency here if I work on it. And there's also, there's so many different elements. I wrote a whole book about it. Okay. So if you are interested in what I'm talking about right now, you can get Yoga's Healing Power, Looking Inward for Change, Growth, and Peace. That's my last book that I wrote in 2016 is when it came out. But there are so many deeper aspects to this practice that are not about the physical poses. It's, can you pay attention to your breath? That's it. You don't have to be able to touch your toes. You don't have to, stand on your hands. You might, if you start practicing, who knows what's going to happen, but that's not the point. And so as I did respond to this person, and I was explaining that what I do in my life is all about teaching, right? Mostly, or sharing my experiences and my feelings and the things that have helped me along the way. And so, I feel that it is correct for me to be transparent in telling you if I'm doing something or I'm asking you to support a fundraiser. I think it is my job to tell you why. You don't have to, you could, at the end of what I've said, you could say, no, I'm not convinced and I don't agree, and no. And that's you have agency. But that's why I spent all that time kind of putting it out there, because I would never ask someone to either practice with me if it's people are coming to me for yoga or meditation or mindfulness, or read my essays and not tell you why I feel the way that I feel. And in the essays, of course I'm telling you, that's what writers do, right? We're sharing our feelings, our opinions, our experiences. That's the job. And again, people can read or not read. People can tune into the podcast or not tune in. No one has to listen to me, but I'm going to say how I feel and what I think. That doesn't mean it's easy for me all the time. And when I was working on this announcement, which most people honestly would just say, here's the time, the date, here's what it is benefiting, and here's the link to sign up. But I really wanted to spend some time sharing about why. And because I know that times are heated. So to be attacked for that, even though I knew that that was a, very likely possibility, still creates anxiety for that kid in me that still has that wiring of what's going to happen if I upset someone. I don't want to. It's never my intention, first of all, to upset anyone. I have gone into, like, the reason I've been teaching yoga for 30 years is because I want to help. I'm hoping that the things that have really helped me find peace in my life will help other people. And I feel pretty, I'm not a zealot. I think maybe yoga is not the thing for you, or meditation, but some way to get a break from the racket in the mind, I think is essential if you want to experience peace in this world. And so, yeah, I'm going to share how I feel, but knowing when I hit publish on anything, whether it's the essay of the week or an announcement like that or the podcast, there's always a little bit of anxiety for me. It's that old stuff, but it's a vulnerable thing to put yourself out there and to say, this is how I feel and this is what I think. And I have to work on that in my personal life as well, in my friendships and my relationships. And I was writing about that too. There have been so many moments in my life when someone hurt my feelings, just to use that as an example, let me down in some way. And I didn't say anything in the moment. I used to not be able to say anything in the moment. It took me years to work on that. But not only would I not say anything in the moment, I wouldn't say anything ever, because I would project and assume, which is something I think we all do, that the person would feel the same way I would feel if they came to me and said, hey, you hurt my feelings, or you let me down, or that thing that you said, just, it felt terrible. If someone came to me and said that, I would feel so awful, so distraught. And so I would project and assume, and it used to be a lot worse. I used to really berate myself for any mistake. When I moved to Los Angeles in 2001, I came from New York City, and you really don't drive in New York City. Like, if you live there, people that have cars in New York City have them because they have like a house outside the city that they're going to go to for the most part, because like alternate side of the street. It's so hard to have a car in New York City, and so expensive. And so I didn't grow up like driving all the time. And when I moved to Los Angeles, I was driving all the time, and I have a very poor sense of direction. It took me a long time to kind of like find my bearings here. And I would get in the car to try to go teach, I'd be driving to teach a yoga class, and I would get lost. This is before we had Waze, GPS, this was Thomas Guide days, okay? And so I'd be like pulled over on the shoulder of the freeway, which is, you don't do that, sobbing with a Thomas Guide, trying to figure out like where I went wrong and how to fix it. So, and cursing myself, berating myself, like the voice inside my head was so unforgiving and critical and shaming. And I just was used to that. I didn't even question it. It didn't occur to me until well into my yoga practice. Like, wait a second, you can actually, shift that. You don't have to just accept that as the way things are, that you're going to have this like really awful voice inside your head all the time, berating you every time you make a mistake. Because when that is your experience, it is so hard, if you do make a mistake, to own it. If you grew up paying for your small and large mistakes in intense and painful ways, then usually what happens for people is they come out of that experience and it's very scary to say, I screwed up, because everything that you know about that means the hammer's going to come down, or something, you're going to be really punished for this mistake that you've made. It took me a lot of work to get through that. I really think one of the key things about being like a happy person who has healthy relationships is being able to say, I am so sorry. Like, I blew that, and I am really sorry that I let you down, and I'm going to figure out what went wrong for me in that moment that led me to do what I did or to say what I said, so that does not happen again next time. Most people, if you can acknowledge how they feel and just say you're sorry with no qualifications, no, it's just a pure, genuine, heartfelt apology, most people are like, no problem. But not everyone. There are people who, they're going to just twist the knife. But most people, and certainly people that you want to be close to, are going to like extend you the same amount of like grace, compassion, forgiveness that, they're going to need on your behalf when they screw up. We're all going to make mistakes sometimes. We're not going to get everything right. We are going to say things that to us feel completely fine, and someone else is going to receive them in a way that you just never would have seen coming. And I experience that sometimes with essays. Sometimes the way people respond, I'm like, oh, that's such a strange, that is so interesting, because like that's not what I meant, or that isn't what I was saying, but that's the way this person read it or heard it, or that's what they're drawing from it. And sometimes you're going to be misunderstood or, misjudged. Like, a lot of things are going to happen. So you make yourself vulnerable. There is no doubt about that when you express yourself, but vulnerability is part of the, the human experience. Like, if you can't do that, you're really going to have a hard time having real intimacy with anyone or real trust. And for me, certainly in my close relationships in my life, that's just like a baseline requirement. I don't need to have 50 really close friends. And I don't, I have a handful of really close friends I could call at any time of day or night, and I know they'd be there for me. And I'm so lucky and, thankful. But every single one of those people can do this thing that I'm talking about, can say, I'm really sorry. Like I let you down, or I hurt your feelings, and, and it's done. We're done. And also can extend that same compassion and forgiveness, in return. You kind of have to have that. If you really want people to know you, you have to be able to say, this felt really bad to me. Can we talk about this? I'm really confused by your reaction. I don't understand. Can you help me understand? But this is all part of really knowing people. Not everything's going to make sense to you. I've had close friendships with people where I'm like, oh, it's so interesting that like she is so, that's a real, issue. Even though she does that thing, that is not okay for her. I can't do it. Like, there are times where I have been like, but if you love someone and they have a thing that is like triggering for them, I mean, as long as it's not, unreasonable, where certainly it's not. Okay, let me just pause here and give an example of something that's unreasonable. If you are in a romantic relationship with someone who has been betrayed in the past, and now they want your passwords and they want to be looking in your phone and looking at, that's not reasonable, right? That's unreasonable. It's not your job to fix something that happened in someone's past with someone else. But if it's not something that's like violating your, your ability to feel comfortable and open, whatever, like I'll do that stuff, once I understand where someone's coming from or what they need, of course, like I don't mind. So that area is something that is like a practice for me. The speaking up if something doesn't feel okay. It's hard for me. And another, sort of thing that I'm always watching myself, like I want to make everything okay for everyone that I care about. And everything is not going to be okay for everyone all the time. Not for you, not for me. That's not realistic. And when you have kids, the first like 10 years of their lives, you're keeping them alive, first of all, but you're also diving in to save the day, like multiple times a day, especially when they're like little and growing and, toddling around and don't know, to teach your kids not to run out into the street and not to run downhill. And there are things that you have to teach your kids that there's a house on our block that for years and years, they had a mailbox attached to the fence on the outside of the house, their street level fence that was at the height of toddlers. I mean, it was a very low mailbox where the bottom of that mailbox was like right at the height of your 2, 3, 4-year-old kid. And so every time we would go down the street, I would say to them as they would be, running ahead, like, watch your head. And that is a phrase no one tells you. If you have children, you're going to be saying, watch your head a lot. So eventually, the idea is that you don't have to say it anymore because the kids they got it now, right? They know to be watching because they've heard it over and over again. And that's kind of like everything that you're teaching. In the beginning, you're teaching them like, hey, you have to pay attention to this and watch out for that. And here's how things work. And then the goal is that your kids grow up and they're people who know how to go out in the world and stand on their own 2 feet and be accountable and be compassionate and understand like the world doesn't revolve around me and I'm part of something, bigger, and how can I help? And these are all the things, right? But when that sort of moment happened between when that shift in my job as a mom went from, okay, making sure they're okay and they're safe and they're, they have everything, to sitting back a little and sometimes letting them struggle. That was really hard for me and I had to work on it. And I've written about this, but like my son, this just is an example, when he was 10, when he started 5th grade, prior to that, from like 2nd through 4th, I was in this mom text chat, and every day after school, especially in like 2nd grade and into 3rd grade, it was like I think there were maybe like 10 of us on this text thread. Somebody's kid would have forgotten their homework. And so you could just count on it. Like every day around, 3:30, there'd be a text. Hey, does anybody have the homework? So-and-so forgot. And then somebody would take a picture of the homework and put it in the text chat, and then you could print the homework out if you needed to. This went on for years. When my son started 5th grade, I said to him before the school year started, we're not doing that anymore. The homework text thing, we're going to stop that, like starting this year, because you're getting older and this is the moment where it's good for you to start to make sure at the end of the day, before you leave, you've looked at the board, you've written down whatever the homework is, you've taken the books home that you need. It's now time for you to take that on. And if it happens that you forget and you lose recess the next day, which is what would happen, hopefully then you'll learn, and maybe you have to lose recess a few times, whatever it is, but like eventually you will not forget anymore. If there are consequences that you don't like, you're gonna not be forgetting. Well, and he was like, okay, like he was into that. And then the first time it happened, he was not so into it anymore. Then he really, really, really wanted me to get the homework because he didn't want to lose the chance to go out on the yard and play with his friends. And I had to fight the urge to just make it better for him, to save him from like this, small loss. But when you're 10, it doesn't feel like a small loss. It feels like a devastation. All my friends are going to go out and play and I'm stuck in the classroom. But I knew that's in his best interest. It's in his best interest for me to not save the day so that he can start taking these things over. That was so much harder for me. If I can tell you, I remember it. I remember just wanting to text the group and make it better, and how hard I had to like sit on my hands to just not do that, and how uncomfortable it was. It felt like, strange to me, but I knew it was better for him. And that's what starts to happen right around 10. And it just gets worse, folks. I have two, teenagers. My son is 17 and a half and my daughter's 15. And the things that you have to sort of, maneuver and figure out this line of like, I love these people, I would do anything for them. I would throw myself in fire to save them. But letting them struggle is an important component of having them learn how to be in this world. And I have to be able to sit with and manage my discomfort and let them not be okay sometimes, because listen, we're all going to go out in the world. Are you okay all the time? I'm not. I have days where I'm really, I'm hurting or I'm struggling in some way or another, even after 30 plus years of practicing yoga. It's not, we're human beings, and a lot of things happen. In the last 3 years, I've lost both my parents. Like there are times in your life and chapters in your life that are just devastating and difficult, no matter how many tools you have. And so, you don't want to set your kids up to not be able to manage that stuff, to collapse in the face of grief or, look, I did collapse in the face of grief many times. But to understand, I'm going to be okay. I have tools, and I have people in my life, and I have the ability to communicate and ask for help when, I know I'm going to be okay. That's huge. And so that's been my kind of goal, as a mom, is to create people who are going to be okay out in the world. Which doesn't mean I'm not going to be here. I'm going to be here as long as I can possibly be here. I will always be here for them with my, until my dying breath. I will always be here. And hopefully even after that, I'll be in them. My mom, I still feel her. Like she's inside. Like I feel her, I hear her, so it's like, but I know that's really the job. And so very hard as a parent, but also as a friend. It's like I have that thing of wanting to make everything okay. If I see that you're suffering, I want to help. But I've learned that helping is often just being there and just saying I'm here and I'm so sorry that you're hurting and I understand, that's really usually the best way you can help someone. It's not trying to fix it or manage it or solve it. It's just being there and extending your hand in the dark, or showing up with dinner, or coming over and depending on what we're talking about, just making sure this person's getting some sun on their face once in a while. That's usually the best kind of help, is just love, right? So that's been work that I've had to do, just understanding that. And when you write, there is this understanding of I'm gonna work on this piece and I'm gonna craft it and really think about what I'm saying and how I'm saying it, and depending on what we're talking, there's this creative process that happens when you are writing an essay or a memoir or anything. And there's also this understanding that you are going to put it out into the world, and then that's it. You don't control how people are going to receive it. They're going to pull from it whatever they're going to pull from it. They may see things that you didn't intend that are interesting. They may draw conclusions that are really odd and not at all what you said. There's a lot of things that can happen, and you just kind of get used to it. It doesn't mean it's easy. There are certain things that I've written, particularly in the last month, where I've been so impassioned and so outraged and enraged that there have been some moments where I'm did I go, have I gone too far? Is it too much rage? But the response has been incredible. There are just so many people, particularly women, but not just women, who are feeling this also. And so, I've come to understand that like you got to let it go. You put it out there and you have to let people feel however they're going to feel. And for me, the job is just to manage whatever anxiety or fear I might still have around that. And of course, no one wants to be attacked, because I've done what I do online for so long, I've been, my yoga website was one of the first 3 back in 2009. I have a big online community, and I have like on our Facebook fan page where I was blogging on there for years and years. And I started doing that in 2009. This is back when we blogged. Now we write personal essays, but back in the day we blogged. And so I was blogging there, and it grew. There's like 174,000 people on that page, right? Which is amazing. I am like blown away by that still, and people would share things and talk about, it was incredible. This was before the algorithm changed and they make you pay to like reach your people. But, you learn as you go that, you don't build your house on someone else's property, right? You put like a paragraph of your essay with a link to your, wherever you want people to go, if that's what you're trying to do, is grow a community. But I'm still, blown away by that, and sometimes intimidated by it. I don't go live on that giant page a lot. I go live on the private group page where there's like, 1,200 people, but the giant, fan page that I built where people are because of things that I wrote and shared, I sometimes am like, that's just so many people. I feel intimidated going live. I decided this year I'm going to get over that and just make myself do it, because that is ridiculous. You built something, you should speak. You should speak, it's time. And again, I'm a grown woman now. I'm not going to allow myself to, be in fear. I'm done. I'm done. And there have been times where I've been attacked. I think most people that are inclined to attack have left already, and the people who are there for it. And it's okay if somebody doesn't like something I say or write or whatever, and they want to leave. Like, these things are all okay. But it's still work, right? We're all works in progress, and like some days it's easier than others. And so one of the other things that I was writing about in the blind spot this week is, that you never know what people are dealing with. And I went to get a trim last week, and my hair person, I've been going to her for years. She's a friend. Her name is Lucy. And Lucy Lacombe, if you're ever in Los Angeles and you want to go to someone amazing, she's my girl. She's amazing. But we always talk about everything and catch up. And so at the end of, we were like, talking for a while, and she said, and it was very much an aside, but people talk to her, that's, she's doing hair. People are sitting in the chair, and she knows everything about everyone. And she said to me in a very offhanded way, I just assume no one is ever totally okay. And I thought, this is why I love you, because she just assumes that no matter who's coming in and how they seem, they're probably not totally okay. There's going to be something that they are grappling with, on some level, in some aspect of their lives. And maybe not every single, but most of the time. And that is a good, if you're going to assume anything, assume that, assume that, because it's that whole idea of like, you never know what someone is going through, so be kind. It's that, and so lately, for whatever reason, and grief is, it is one of the most, I don't know. I've had so much of it in the last few years that, particularly with my mom, with my dad, it's a very different kind of situation. He was, an interesting person. He was a really terrible dad. So, and he had a very short temper, and it was tough. It was tough, and it was really hard at the end. I was, his primary caregiver, and he would yell at me. Like, it wasn't easy. And it's like, I can appreciate the qualities in him that I think made him a good uncle, a good friend, the qualities that, inspired him to start sculpting when he was 70 and not tell himself he's too old to try something new. He's always open-minded and non-judgmental, but he was just a really not a good dad, and he hurt every woman in his life, and all three of his children, one of whom is a son. So he wasn't a person that, you would want to have as your dad. So I can't say that I miss him, and that's hard. It's a hard thing to say and to feel, but I also think it's good to say it, because I would imagine I'm not alone in that feeling. With my mom, it's absolutely not like that, and she and I had a tough time. It was not like it was all rosy. It was really difficult. She was a force in my life forever. I loved her, like, just with every cell in my being. But the alcoholism was really hard, and she had a lot of rage that she directed toward me, and it was really painful. And she was not someone who could tolerate a hard conversation. She was not accountable. I think she said, "I'm sorry" once in all of our years together, and it was qualified. "I'm sorry, but," it was tough. And I couldn't, I would try to talk to her about the drink. She was absolutely unwilling to, face the fact that she was an alcoholic and get help. Like, it was very painful, but I loved her. Like, that wasn't the issue. And so it hurt like hell. She really broke my heart, like, again and again and again, but I loved her. So I, just try to figure out, like, how I could have her in my life and keep myself safe emotionally and otherwise. And it ended up being like moving 3,000 miles away was part of what worked, and other boundaries and things. But the last month of her life, when she was in the ICU, we had a lot of healing. Like, really, when my mother could no longer speak, that is when we started communicating with each other, and a lot of healing occurred, which I'm so grateful, because it would have been so painful for me to have to live with things the way that they were. And I'm writing a whole memoir, really, about my mom and me, and like our relationship, and it's, certainly has other themes and things happening, but that's really the heart of it. But she could never do that sort of conversation, or have that kind of interaction of like, hey, this really hurt my feelings, or this really upset me. That wasn't going to happen. It's like, you're being like overly sensitive, or you're being dramatic, or, whatever. It just wasn't, there wasn't going to be any productive, meaningful conversation that would lead to healing, and like, that just wouldn't. So I learned as I was growing up that if I was upset or hurt or disappointed or let down or scared or confused, I would just manage those feelings. I wouldn't bother saying anything to her, because it wouldn't go well. And some of the time she'd get furious, if I questioned anything, or her response was fury. And so you stop, right? You're like, oh, all right, I'll just handle that on my own. And for really, up until that last month of her life, that's what I did for the most part. I just managed my own feelings and kind of I worked both sides of the equation. When something would go wrong, I wouldn't bother saying to her, this really hurt. I would just like manage my feelings, tell myself like she has her own trauma, she can't do it, and like forgive her and accept an apology I never received. I think that's like, I've heard that somewhere. That's not me. But I did that a lot with her. I would just accept apologies she never extended. And that's not, I would do that for my mom because we had such a complicated relationship and she was my mother, but it's not something I'm going to do for anyone else. Like, that's just not healthy and really not okay. And these are all parts of it. So lately, she passed away on December 7th of 2021 at 3:37 a.m. I was there. And the first year after was just, I don't even know how I kept my head above water, honestly. And I could start crying right now. But it has gotten easier. I'm not in that state that I was in that first year. It's more like this dull ache that just lives in my heart, and that's kind of how it is every day. But lately it's been like this again, where I just, I have these moments where I'm just like done in. And if you haven't been through it yet, where you've lost someone that you just feel like, how is this possible? That this whole person just is like, I can't call them and hear their voice. I can't, get on a plane and see them. I can't do those things anymore. And I'm just going to let myself cry because it is sad. It's sad, but it's also part of the human experience. And we're all going to go through it. I'm sorry to say, like, if you haven't been through it. And if you let it, it softens you, and it makes you become a more empathetic person who can understand when someone else is going through that, and who knows what to say, or not say, or just like how to show up. So there is a beauty in it, as brutal as it is. There is something beautiful in like having your heart just, smashed open in this way. But I've been going through more of this lately again. So it's not the dull ache, it's like the ache I was describing. It's like it moves into my throat and suddenly there's like tears everywhere. And grief is like that, it just hits you. I don't know, you're like driving, it's a nice day, and then suddenly, just something, you see something, or, or a song, whatever, just like it does you in. And I've had many, many experiences like that, but for whatever reason, I'm just having like a surge of those feelings lately. And it just so happened that when I received that furious email, I was in that kind of moment. And, it's okay. Like, I don't want people to not say how they feel, but it was just bad timing, for me. It was bad timing. And I think that I just wish we could all kind of work with the assumption that almost everyone is not going to be fully okay. And you never know when you hit send on an email if you're hitting somebody right in a moment like that. And so maybe, even though we're in these heated times, right? If at all possible, to take the moment to kind of adjust your mirrors. Like, remind yourself, people see things in different ways. Someone expressing an opinion is not an attack on me and my choices. And maybe if I'm gonna respond to something online or some whatever, I could just pause for a minute, and maybe I don't need to respond, or if I do, maybe I can do it, at least with, I don't know, some kindness, some compassion, So, yeah, that's what I wanted to dig into in the essay, and I did. But also with the podcast, just to talk about that, to really try to like extend one another just a little more, compassion, grace, whatever. I know that there are things that people say sometimes that just feel like such an affront to everything you hold dear, to all of your core beliefs. And somebody posts something and you're just like, oh. But my feeling more and more is that it's that whole thing of any attention feeds it. So it's like when you train a puppy, it's positive feedback only. That's what works. You know, you just keep rewarding the dog for the behavior you like. And I think you got to do that with the algorithm too. You know, and it's not that we want to end up in an echo chamber. I understand you can get yourself in a lot of trouble that way. If you're only hearing from people who are like-minded, you know, you're not probably seeing the full picture. But there's a difference between that and also like what we engage with. And even if something enrages you, you don't have to click on it. You don't have to respond to it. You can just not. And then you're not feeding the beast. And you're not, you know, upping your rage quotient, upping your blood pressure. Yeah. So that goes back to like what I was talking about at the beginning, which is choosing one thought over another, you know, deciding where you're going to direct your attention or your energy. And this is the stuff in the yoga practice that's really, this is the life-changing stuff. Putting your ankle behind your head, like you may never do that. I do that. I don't even have to be very warm to do that. And I don't do anything practical with it. Okay. You don't like say to yourself, oh, I'm having a really tough time. I'm going to put my ankle behind my head. Or I'm doing the laundry, so I'm going to put my ankle. Like you don't use it for anything. Like it's, that isn't it. You know, what's it is just like having tools to decide, do I want to respond to that or not? Do I want to tell the algorithm I want to see more of this or not? You know, and maybe not. Like, and if you are going to respond, to maybe model what it looks like to disagree in some kind of, you know, respectful way. And I know it's hard. Believe me when I tell you, I know it's hard. You know, it's a practice for all of us just to think about. So I thank you for, you know, joining me. I'm always interested in what you have to say, what you think, how you feel, and I'm really easy to find. So I hope that you will come and find me if you have things that you want to share, or, you know, questions or things you want to talk about or anything. I'm always up for a respectful, open conversation, and I'm sending you a lot of love.